For more than 2 years, the dominant narrative of the Ukraine war has been one of stalemate. Russia, the argument went, could absorb losses, outlast Ukraine, and eventually impose its will through sheer endurance. That assumption is now breaking down. A series of military, political, and strategic developments points to a different reality. The war's trajectory is beginning to shift in Ukraine's favor. Russia no longer holds the initiative in the war against Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated in an interview with Fox News. According to the Atlantic Council, many European leaders likely share the Ukrainian leaders' optimistic assessment. Ukraine's position is the strongest it has been since the war began, Finnish President Alexander Stubb recently noted. The publication emphasizes that Ukraine's successes offer a rare opportunity to increase pressure on Putin and create conditions for a negotiated settlement to Europe's largest conflict since World War II. However, this opportunity will likely prove temporary. Therefore, Kyiv's European partners must seize the moment and demonstrate their ability to act decisively on the international stage by increasing their support for Ukraine, the article adds. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the West's caution allowed Russia to regroup, mobilize additional manpower, expand defense production, and build massive fortifications. Therefore, now that the tide of the war is once again turning in Ukraine's favor, European leaders must avoid repeating the mistakes of 2022. The publication adds that addressing Ukraine's personnel shortage is a priority. European governments should reconsider long-standing restrictions on military funding. Due to the extraordinary burden on the Ukrainian state budget, significant additional resources are required to finance competitive salaries and incentives for service in order to implement significant reforms aimed at improving the recruitment, maintenance, and mobilization of military personnel, the publication emphasizes. Another important aspect is support for Ukraine's defense sector. Rather than relying on the transfer of weapons from existing stockpiles, European governments should make greater use of EU mechanisms to ensure long-term financing for Ukrainian defense production. Europe should also provide Ukraine with privileged access to critical technologies, particularly advanced electronics, cloud computing infrastructure, artificial intelligence tools, and communication systems. In many cases, the obstacle is not a technology shortage, but regulatory barriers and export control regimes designed for peacetime, not a major European war, explains the Atlantic Council. Furthermore, psychological resilience must also be part of the European support strategy. After more than 4 years of full-scale invasion, combat stress, trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder are no longer individual challenges but have become strategic issues. Europe has world-class expertise in mental health and rehabilitation. Integrating these capabilities into Ukraine's armed forces recovery system will strengthen the country's long-term resilience as reliably as the supply of ammunition or equipment, the report notes. Ultimately, the publication writes, Europe must maintain political unity while raising the costs of Moscow's aggression, namely stricter sanctions enforcement, increased oversight of sanctions-busting networks, and more coordinated efforts to counter Russian influence operations abroad. Taken together, these measures will amount to much more than just support for Ukraine. They will be a manifestation of European strategic initiative. For years, European leaders have talked about strategic autonomy and turning Europe into a serious security player. The coming months could be the most compelling test of how realistic these ambitions are, the Atlantic Council concluded. Ukraine's role in the war is also evolving. It is no longer simply a recipient of assistance. It is becoming a provider of expertise. In drone warfare, the defining feature of this conflict, Ukraine has emerged as the global reference point. Its battlefield innovations are now being studied and exported. Ukraine is now deploying its anti-drone experts to the Gulf, while the Pentagon has reached out to tap that expertise as well. Ukraine is not just adapting. It is writing the manual for modern warfare. On the battlefield, the shift is becoming visible. Russian forces have struggled to make meaningful gains in recent months. In April, Ukraine recaptured more territory than it lost for the first time in roughly 2 years, Geopolitical Monitor says. At the same time, Ukraine has dramatically expanded the reach of its strike capabilities. Drone attacks now routinely penetrate deep into Russian territory, with reported ranges reaching up to 1,800 kilometers. Energy infrastructure has become a primary target. The Twop's refining complex has come under sustained attack and has been significantly degraded as a result. These operations extend the battlefield into Russia itself and impose real economic and logistical costs. The cumulative effect is clear. The war is no longer contained to the front line. Russia is increasingly feeling it at home. Pressure is also building inside Russia. Putin's approval rating has fallen to its lowest level since before the invasion, even according to state-affiliated polling. In a tightly managed system, even a modest decline carries significance. The cracks are not limited to polling. They are appearing in unexpected parts of Russian society. Figures embedded in the cultural and political mainstream are beginning to speak out. Influencer Victoria Bonia, with 13 million subscribers, has publicly criticized aspects of the system. Pro-Kremlin lawyer Ilya Remeslo has also turned critical. These are not opposition figures. Their criticism suggests that the war's costs are beginning to register beyond the usual dissenting circles. On the military side, the pressure is even more direct. Russian casualties this year are now outstripping recruitment, even as the Kremlin offers increasingly generous pay packages to attract volunteers. The pool of willing recruits is shrinking. This dynamic does not produce immediate collapse, but it steadily erodes Russia's ability to sustain the war over time. Ukraine, by contrast, continues to innovate. It has begun deploying ground-based robotic armed systems capable of taking enemy positions with limited direct infantry involvement. These systems are still in early stages, but they point to a future in which technology allows Ukraine to offset Russia's numerical advantages. Diplomatically, the balance is shifting as well. Ukrainian confidence in U.S. mediation is declining. At the same time, Kyiv is increasingly skeptical of relying on a future U.S. administration under Donald Trump. With U.S. support uncertain, Ukraine is pivoting more decisively toward Europe. That pivot is consequential. As questions grow around the cohesion of NATO, Europe is moving into a more central role. Ukraine is no longer just a partner. It is becoming a core component of European security, as the dramatic increase in financial and military aid provisions makes clear. Taken together, these developments point to a clear conclusion. The assumptions that once favored Russia are weakening. Ukraine is not simply holding the line. It is adapting faster, extending the battlefield, and reshaping the strategic environment. None of this guarantees a decisive Ukrainian victory in the near term. Russia retains significant resources and the capacity to sustain the war. But the direction of travel is changing. Battlefield stagnation, economic pressure, technological adaptation, and shifting alliances are converging to increasingly constrain Moscow. The most likely outcome is not a dramatic collapse, but a forced recalibration. As pressure mounts across multiple fronts, the Kremlin may find itself with fewer options and less leverage than it anticipated. For the first time in a long time, time itself may no longer be on Russia's side. The Wall Street Journal says that since February, Russia has failed to push back Ukraine, which has recaptured more territory than it lost. Kyiv's improvements in its independent missile and drone development programs have enabled precision strikes on Russian military and industrial facilities located over 1,000 kilometers from the border.